Hello, welcome back to my story videos. I hope you had a lovely week off and a good break and a good rest. We are back with the last two chapters of the Werepuppy. So we've got chapter 6 today and chapter 7 tomorrow. If you remember, we left off with the puppy, the Werepuppy, creating havoc all over the garden and the house. And Dad said that Mickey could keep the puppy for now. So let's see what happens in chapter 6. It seemed a good idea to feed Wolfie as soon as possible, as he'd already chewed several fingers, tried to eat a rabbit supper, and now, after a sniff at Wilbur the rat and a gnaw at Mona, he was severely worrying Marigold's My Little Ponies. "I'll get some proper dog food tomorrow," said Mum. "Meanwhile, I wonder if he'd like a hamburger. He certainly looks ready for proper meat. He's not a little baby puppy, he's more of a boy." "Like me," Mickey said, helping Mum delve into the deep freeze. He found some frozen hamburgers and took one out of the packet. He held it up to Wolfie. "Do you think you'd like this, Wolfie?" And Wolfie nodded enthusiastically. He leapt up and snatched the frozen hamburger right out of Mickey's hand. He did his best to chomp it up, but his teeth skidded across the icy surface. "Well, you can't eat it like that, silly," said Mickey. "You've got to wait until it thaws." What does thaw mean? Have a think about that. Wolfie didn't want to wait. He gnawed and slobbered and licked the hamburger like an ice lolly. Mickey knew that ordinary wolves came from the north, so maybe Wolfie had a built-in love of frozen food. He seemed to have a built-in love of any food, to be honest. Wolfie wanted more than his share of the hamburgers when they were cooked, and most of Mickey's chips and peas. He noisily demanded a big lick of ice cream afterwards, though Mum got very cross and wouldn't let him share Mickey's bowl. Wolfie particularly wanted a chocolate biscuit when they had a cup of tea. Mickey showed him how to sit up and beg, and Wolfie got the hang of it immediately. He scurried round to Mandy and begged appealingly, and she laughed and gave him half of her biscuit. "He's not getting any of my biscuit," said Marigold, stuffing it into her mouth so quickly that she choked. "Horrid old ugly thing, keep it away from me," as she coughed, spraying biscuit crumbs everywhere. "Not Marigold, Wolfie. We wouldn't want her messy, soggy old biscuit anyway," said Mickey. Wolfie steered well clear of Marigold and edged up to Merrill, who had only taken one bite of her biscuit so far. "Beg for it then, Wolfie," said Mickey. Wolfie sat up and begged. "See, Merrill, he is trained already," said Mickey. He spoke a little too soon. As soon as Wolfie devoured Merrill's biscuit, he stood up, circled the room in a purposeful way, and then squatted. "Oh, no," Mum said. "Not again." "Worse," said Mandy, giggling. "Yuck," said Mona. "Show him what he's done and then take him out in the garden, son," said Dad. Mickey did his best. Wolfie didn't seem at all ashamed. He didn't want to leave the room, especially when there were still chocolate biscuits on offer. He argued with Mickey, snapping at him. "Watch out, Mickey," said Mum. "It's okay, he won't really hurt me. Come on, you messy old pup. Out, I say," said Mickey sternly, and Wolfie slunk to his side. "I'd never have thought it of him," Dad muttered. "Our Mickey's got so much spirit when he wants, and that pup's got an evil temper. He went for me, and I don't mind admitting I wasn't too thrilled about it, but Mickey seems quite fearless." Mickey swaggered out into the garden with Wolfie. He found a spare patch of earth. There were quite a few, actually, after Wolfie's race across the flower patch, and tried to explain to Wolfie that this was now his own special toilet. Wolfie found the whole thing a huge joke and dashed around, grinning and refusing to listen properly. He disgraced himself again before bedtime. The whole house was starting to reek of disinfectant, and Mum was thoroughly regretting Wolfie's adoption. "I've a good mind to take him straight back to the dog's house tomorrow," she said grimly, still scrubbing at the carpet. "Mum," said Mickey. "It's okay, son. Mum doesn't mean it," said Dad. "She's just a bit upset because of her poor carpet. I don't think that pup's going to make it out into the garden for a bit. We'd better put some newspaper down. Then the minute he starts to tiddle, or worse, we'll pop him on the newspaper. He'll soon get the hang of it." "Thanks, Dad," said Mickey. He was kneeling on the carpet, one arm round Wolfie, the other busily crayoning a new moon picture for Miss Monk. He was trying hard now, using his best cartridge paper and his biggest set of felt tips. He coloured the vast rocky surface of the moon and a strange purple sky and a little tiny blue and green earth spinning so far away. He did a rocket on the moon, and tumbling out of it, taking their first joyous leaps into the moon's atmosphere, were two tiny silver figures in spacesuits. One was upright and the other was on all fours. Marigold stopped grooming her panicky ponies back into submission and walked past, kicking out with her feet as she went, sort of accidentally on purpose. But just as her slipper touched Mickey's drawing hand, Wolfie growled ferociously and Marigold jumped smartly out of the way. Wolfie himself wasn't so sensible. He was so keen to see Mickey's picture that he slathered admiringly and made a long slimy smudge all down one side. And then he struggled free of Mickey's restraining arm at one point and pranced right across the paper, leaving several muddy paw prints. "Wolfie, you nuisance," said Mickey. He usually found it unbearable when his pictures got spoiled, and this one was one of his best efforts. He had to show it to Miss Monk too, and she might not be so understanding this time. But somehow Mickey didn't feel too worried. "Time for bed, Mickey and Marigold," said Mum. "Now what about Wolfie? Where's he going to sleep?" "Locked up in the garden shed," said Marigold. "My rabbits don't want him howling underneath them. They're unsettled enough as it is. Rabbits are supposed to live in burrows, not blooming great skyscrapers," said Merrill. "If Wolfie's got to sleep in the garden shed, then I'm sleeping out there too," said Mickey. "You're scared of the dark, Mickey." "I wouldn't be scared if I were with Wolfie." And Wolfie growled in agreement. "No one's sleeping outside," said Mum. "Then Wolfie can come and sleep with me," said Mickey excitedly. "You're not having that puppy in your bed. I absolutely forbid it," Mum said firmly. "I think we'll try bedding Wolfie down in a corner of the kitchen. Later on we'll get him a proper basket, but for now we'd better make do with a cardboard box. Marigold, where's that big box I gave you when we came back from Sainsbury's?" "You can't have that. That's my little pony's special stable," said Marigold indignantly. "We'll get you another box tomorrow," said Mum. "But Wolfie needs it for tonight." And for once Marigold couldn't talk her out of it. Wolfie didn't seem particularly grateful. Mum found him an old blanket and made him up a very comfortable bed inside the box, and Mickey settled him into it with a biscuit to nibble on. But Wolfie bounded up again as soon as he'd demolished the biscuit. Mickey said good night firmly and shut the door on him. Wolfie howled reproachfully and scrabbled at the kitchen door. He went on howling and scrabbling most of the evening. Mona and Maddie and Merrill went to bed. Wolfie didn't go to bed. He howled and scrabbled. Mum and Dad went to bed, and Wolfie still didn't go to bed. He howled and scrabbled and howled. Mickey couldn't stand it any longer. It wasn't poor Wolfie's fault. Werewolves were nocturnal. Wolfie couldn't be expected to go to sleep, and he sounded so lonely howling away all by himself down in the kitchen. It was a dark night too. Wolfie was only a baby werewolf. Maybe he was a bit scared of the dark. Mickey was rather scared of the dark himself. Marigold was right about that. He normally didn't like getting up in the night, not even to go to the toilet. He certainly didn't want to go all the way downstairs. The stairs were the darkest part of the house, and they creaked at every step. He was always frightened hands might reach right through the banisters and grab his ankles. But now he was so worried about poor Wolfie that he jumped out of bed, shuffled across the landing in his slippers, and ran down the stairs determinedly. He decided that if there were any hands, that he'd simply stamp on them. He reached the downstairs hall perfectly safely. Wolfie's howl was becoming deafening. Mickey opened the kitchen door, and Wolfie flew at him, practically jumping into his arms. He licked Mickey's face excitedly, as if they'd been parted for several weeks instead of several hours. "Silly old boy," said Mickey, giving Wolfie a big hug. "Come on, you've got to try to go to sleep. I'll put you back to bed in your box, and I'll stay and chat with you for a bit, okay?" Mickey felt his way uncertainly across the pitch-black kitchen, Wolfie struggling in his arms. He wondered if he might be dreaming for a moment, because the kitchen floor seemed to have changed into a beach. His slippers crunched on a lot of gritty stuff like sand, and then he seemed to have reached the sea because his slippers were soaked and he was almost paddling. The moon suddenly came out from behind the thick clouds and Mickey saw the kitchen properly. He stiffened with shock. "Oh, Wolfie!" he gasped. Bags of sugar were spread all over the floor, while chewed cartons of milk made a lake on the lino. "You're a bad, bad boy," said Mickey, and he gave Wolfie a little shake. Wolfie gave a high-pitched howl and jumped right out of Mickey's arms. He seemed a strange, eerie silver in the moonlight, and yet his eyes glinted gold. He threw back his head and howled, every inch a werewolf. "Oh, gosh," said Mickey, his skin prickling. "Calm down, Wolfie. Try to be a good little pup." The moonlight was making Wolfie want to be very bad indeed. He streaked around the room, his teeth gleaming. He'd had his very large meal of hamburgers and biscuits just a few hours ago, but now he looked ravenous. Next door's tabby cat leapt onto the outside window ledge on one of her nightly prowls. She saw Wolfie and her nose bumped the window pane in astonishment. Wolfie saw the tabby cat and dribbled ferociously. His teeth bared. "Shoo!" Mickey shouted, flapping his hand at the cat. She didn't need to be told twice. She gave one yowl of terror and fled as Wolfie sprang. Mickey leapt after him, catching him back by one paw. Wolfie's head banged hard against the window. Mickey's head banged even harder against the wall. They ended up in a heap on the very sticky floor. They both moaned and grumbled at each other. "Oh, you can't go around chumping up all the neighbourhood cats, Wolfie," said Mickey sternly. "It's no use whining and telling me you're hungry. Here, why don't you lick up this sugar?" Wolfie wasn't interested in feeble food like sugar now. He wanted furry cat flesh. "You've got to try to be a good boy," said Mickey, but Wolfie enjoyed being bad too much. He struggled to his paws and shook his sore head, still salivating. "Come back here," said Mickey, scrambling after him, but his feet skidded in the pool of milk and he fell headlong. Wolfie went scampering across the kitchen and straight out the door. "Come back!" Mickey shouted, picking himself up and starting to run. Wolfie stayed. There was a sudden savage growl and a heavy thud as Wolfie pounced on something. "Oh, goodness," said Mickey, charging into the living room. Wolfie was violently attacking a large sheep, going for its throat. He growled excitedly, but the sheep didn't even emit one baa. Mickey blinked and realised it was only the furry rug. He breathed a sudden sigh of relief and then gasped again as Wolfie ripped the rug into ribbons. "No, stop it! That's Mum's rug. She'll be so cross. She'll send you back to that shelter, you silly dog. Oh, please, Wolfie, do try to see sense." The moon suddenly went behind the clouds again. Wolfie couldn't see anything, let alone sense. He coughed in a confused manner. Mickey felt his way to the wall and switched on the light. The rug was in shreds. Wolfie whimpered amongst the strands of wool. Furry balls caught in his sharp little claws. His fur was dark grey again, although covered in a positive cardi of white wool from the rug. His eyes had lost their golden glint. They were a clear amber, and they were clouded with fear as Mickey marched up towards him. "Yes, you've been very, very bad," said Mickey, "but don't look so worried. I know you can't help it. Not really, anyway, but you're going to have to learn somehow. Now, how about helping me clear up some of this mess, eh?" Wolfie trotted about as helpfully as he could, but he simply just trod milk and sugar all over the carpet and spread the woolly balls from the rug back onto the kitchen. Mickey wasn't much more successful either, though he did as much as mopping and sweeping as he could. He was so tired out by the time he'd finished trying to set the rooms to rights. "It's bedtime now. You in your bed here, me in mine upstairs," Mickey yawned. Wolfie shook his head. He leant against Mickey, whimpering. "You can't come upstairs with me. Mum's going to kill me." "It looks like I'll have to snuggle up with you then, doesn't it?" Mickey climbed inside the cardboard box, hunching upon the blanket, his knees digging into his chin. Wolfie jumped in, panting happily. "Oh, don't breathe right in front of my face, Wolfie. It tickles," said Mickey. Wolfie licked instead. Oh, slobbery! Now come on, we've got to sleep, said Mickey, glancing up at the window, hoping the moon stayed well hidden. He put his arms firmly round Wolfie, and they both shut their eyes and went to sleep at last. We've just got chapter 7 left. I wonder what happens. Catch up tomorrow for the last bit of the book.